So if you are like me, you spent part of your New Year's Eve watching Monica's documentary, The Cavalry, on the Yang 2020 campaign. We're going to talk with Monica herself about the project, the background and putting it together and things she's learned. But before we get into the deep discussion, we're going to have Andrew and friends warm us up.
There's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, this and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up. Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, this and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Monica Gora, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm awesome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an honor. I think there were thousands of people stuck to their screens last night watching your documentary.
I know, it's so cool. I can't believe it. I can't believe it's done.
And let me tell you something. I used to do a lot of edited videos for this channel. Mm-hmm. I stopped because it took too damn long.
Yeah.
To just do like a 3-minute or 5-minute video.
Yeah, that's what I learned doing this as well. It takes a long time.
I was watching your video and I was watching these sequences where you're like annotating or you're showing like this historic Twitter feed evolve. And I'm like, oh, that must have taken her like a whole day, that scene. Right? Watching with my kids. I was like, yeah, just so you guys know, like this is serious editing here.
I had no experience editing. So this was like 10 months where 24/7. This summer, I flat out deleted like all of my like Netflix, Hulu, everything. I didn't watch any TV. I didn't listen to music. It was just like watching campaign footage 24/7 and just editing. Like that was it. That's my life for like 10 months.
I mean, and you brought in a lot of footage from a lot of different sources, which tells me that you probably watched 10 times that amount.
Exactly. Sometimes, my God, I mean, Yang Gang, they were streaming sometimes for like 9 hours, and I would sit there and like listen to this 9 hours of footage and pull like maybe a sentence or like not at all. And so it was a lot to dig through, but there's so many gems in there. It was really fun to dig through.
It's but you know what? When you found that scene of Kai screaming into his pillow,
that was amazing.
Gold. I was like,
I couldn't believe they were streaming when that happened. Like, I can't believe they caught that moment on film. It was so good.
Oh yeah. I mean, Kai's a pro. I mean, he's now doing all this TikTok stuff with like, some crazy number of followers. So yeah, I'm sure this won't be the last we see of Kai Watson.
I hope he comes back.
Yeah, I think he will. In some capacity. But Monica, tell us a little bit about the woman behind the documentary. Like, who's Monica Gora?
Oh my God, me.
Yeah.
Myself.
People want to know, Monica. They want to know who's the famous documentarian.
Well, I've been, Yang Gang this whole time, but I will say that I've been more of like an observer in the Yang Gang. So I haven't been hugely active, but I've been like following it kind of religiously ever since the Rogan interview. I mean, that kind of just like completely, like many people, just completely shifted my perspective, and it was so cool to kind of find this community. Actually, I can tell you about how I found the Yang Gang, because that's kind of a fun story. So I heard the Rogan interview in February, and it was like, I mean, I couldn't even believe that I listened to the episode, because usually I read the Rogan descriptions, and if I had seen that it was a candidate for president that was on, I wouldn't have clicked on it, because I don't hear that kind of stuff. I was like very, very disengaged politically, but like more than disengaged, like actively angry at politics and just really don't have anything to do with it. And but I listened to that episode by accident, and it was like one of those things where like a sentence here and there, I just kind of had it on while I was at work, and a sentence here or there just kind of caught my attention until finally I was just like listening so intently, and I think I replayed it like 3 times that day. I was like blown away. I just like loved the guy. But because I never followed a primary before, I wasn't registered to a party, I didn't really like get into, like, I didn't do anything about it. I was just like, that guy's amazing. Like, I hope he goes places.
Right.
We'll see. And then it wasn't until like August, I think, where I was in the car with my brother and sister. And my brother said something where he started talking about one of the candidates. And he was like, I really think you should check this person out. Like, I've been looking into their history, and like, I think it's going to be a good candidate. And I was like, oh, I don't really want to, but like, okay, fine. Like I'll have an open mind and I'll look this person up. And then so I go home, and I don't want to say who it was, but I go and I look this person up on YouTube, and I watched a couple of interviews, and I was livid. Like, I was so frustrated that my brother, who's very smart, was like recommending this person to me. And that's when I remembered hearing Andrew Yang. And so I texted him back, and I was like, hold on. No, you got to listen to this guy. And I was going to the Rogan podcast. But before I even could, he sent me the DNC speech, because that was the first thing that popped up on YouTube at the time. I guess this was like right after that speech had happened. And I listened to that speech, and that blew me away, because like on the Rogan interview, he was like a really intelligent guy with a lot of good ideas, but I didn't see him as a leader yet. Right. It was just like a very chill interview. But at that DNC speech, I mean, you remember that DNC.
Yeah. He turned it on.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, he was such a leader. He like commanded that room. Yeah. And that's when I was like, I need to follow this guy. So I started actively kind of like Googling him every day and like watching YouTube videos all the time. But I wasn't on Twitter. I didn't know there was a Yang Gang. I didn't know anything was going on. And in September, I remember, so I live in Philadelphia, and he had a rally at the Philly Art Museum. And so I heard about it, and I was like, oh, I guess maybe I can go. But I didn't think anyone would be there. So I was like, this is so awkward. Like, maybe I'll just walk by and like see if anyone's there. I assumed it would be like 5 people standing around. I have a friend who works at the art museum. So I texted her. I was like, is anyone outside? And she's like, I don't see anyone. And I was like, this is so weird. Okay. So I walked by a couple hours later, and there was just this massive, massive crowd. And I was like, and everyone's like wearing math hats, and they have signs, and there's like stuff painted on cars. I think it was also the first rally that Matt went to. I didn't know him at the time. And so I go to this rally, and I wasn't familiar with his stump speech. I, again, still didn't really know that much about politics. And I was just blown away, because sometimes he would ask questions like that call-in response part that he has in his stump speech. Right. Where he asks about when's the last time like life expectancy declined, and all of a sudden this whole crowd just yells back Spanish flu of 1918. I was looking around, and I'm like, how does everyone know that? Like, and then at one point everyone starts taking PowerPoint. Like, I don't even know why. Like, literally no idea why. And I was just like, what is going on here? But I was so energized after that. I was just like, something weird is going on here, and I don't know what it is. I continued watching YouTube videos. One of Paget videos eventually showed up. I was watching it. I didn't know much about YouTube either. I didn't know you could live stream. I didn't know there was a chat feature. So I would just play this stuff on my TV. And one time this Paget video comes up, and she says something out of complete nowhere. She just goes, oh, that's the ice cream truck hasn't come yet. She just like says that in the middle of the stream. And I was like, what a weird sentence to say out of nowhere. Like, who is she talking to? And how does this person know there's like an ice cream truck? And I was just like, what is going on? So I kept like diving deeper and deeper. And eventually, like, I think around the time of National Yang Gang Day, everyone was talking about it. The sky baking had just happened. So I learned about like Zach and Matt's show and stuff. And so I went out for National Yang Gang Day, and we did this cool like trash cleanup, and everyone had like business cards that they had made from like the Yang print signs. And I would just something really interesting is happening here, and I don't know what it is. And then I got back, I like got on Twitter for the first time, and I just posted like a photo from the trash cleanup. And all of a sudden, like, and I have like no followers, like nothing, like I had never used Twitter before. And all of a sudden, as I'm walking home, my phone is just like blowing up, like dozens and dozens of notifications. And all of a sudden there's like 700 likes on it. And then I watched Paget's video that night, and she shows it like in her stream. And I was like, this is so wild. Like, I don't know, there's some kind of like a community here. And I don't know. After that, I just got like really into it. So
wow.
Yang story.
And when did the idea of doing a documentary enter your mind? Because you mentioned you had not done a lot of video editing before, so that this was a little bit of a departure for you.
It was a total departure. Yeah, it didn't really happen until the beginning of COVID. So actually, in November, when the media blackout was happening, when it was like really gearing up, at that point I started just collecting a lot of stuff. And so I started making videos and bookmarking like a lot of tweets and like screenshotting a lot of tweets. But I didn't know what I was doing it for. It was just kind of this intuitive thing where I was like, this feels important. And I feel it's getting lost, because it wasn't even the media coverage that was like biased or whatever. It was also that when people did talk about the Yang Gang, it felt like they weren't talking about it like correctly. Like they weren't expressing like how like the emotional aspect of it, how like people like, I don't know, like how inspiring it was to like see this community. And so I just started saving a lot of stuff because I didn't want it to like get lost, but I didn't know what I was doing it for. It wasn't until COVID. So it was, I think, April, like late April. And I was like really like the state of the world, I mean, was really like falling apart at the time. And like the Yang Gang was kind of like falling apart. And there was like a lot of fracturing and everything felt really like broken. And I don't know, it was just like a bad time. And I kind of just got really like frustrated. And I was gonna like I just kind of wanted to throw it all away. Like I was like, I need to like delete Twitter. Like the Yang Gang's done, Yang dropped out, COVID, you know, it's everything, like the world just felt like it was like falling apart. I was just like, I don't really want to see, I don't want to be reminded of this right now. So I was gonna like delete all my files and like delete Twitter and like really just kind of like be done with it and move on with my life. And so one day I was sitting there and I was like deleting all these screenshots, but some of these tweets were like really capturing my attention because people were saying such beautiful things about like how they felt, how like Yang inspired them to like be better people and stuff. And it was like heartbreaking to like delete this stuff. So I was just like, you know what, don't make any rash decisions. Give it 1 week and then see if you still feel this way in a week. And if you feel this way in a week, like follow through and delete everything. And, that Sunday, I was at my parents' house and we were having like breakfast, and my mom's like very conservative and we don't usually talk about politics or whatever. And we were just kind of talking about the state of the world, and completely unprovoked, like I didn't say anything about this. She just goes, oh, well, you know, Andrew's like a smart guy. So what does he think about this? I was like, whoa, like, I can't express how like wild it was to hear her say that. And I was like, we just started talking about Yang, and then she says something like, oh, it's like crazy how the media treated him. And I was like, I know. And then we started revving me up. And all of a sudden we talked for like 2 hours. It was like a lightning bolt hit me or something. Like, I don't even know how to explain this. It was like, all of a sudden I was getting all these memories and they were like, just like going into my head at like rapid pace. And I was like, well, I have to do something with this. I have to do something with this. And I just like ran to my computer and I just started like pulling videos of like every random memory I could think of, every random memory I was referencing. And I was just like, I didn't know what I was doing with it. I was just like, I just want to like smash them all together. Like, I just want to take all these like little moments and I just want to put them together. And I didn't go to sleep that night. I called out of work the next day. I just like couldn't stop working on this. And then it like just slowly turned into a documentary. It like really wasn't intentional at all.
Yeah, it sounds like it was almost like this video scrapbook.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it turned into something that really felt like a put together documentary, you know, at the end.
By then,
but
yeah.
It started out just for yourself to kind of remember stuff. And
exactly, yeah.
I was curious, like, since you've seen so much footage and you were, you know, in the middle of it kind of as a supporter, what were some kind of insights that you picked up as a result of doing the documentary that maybe you yourself didn't even realize at the time, but, you know, sort of like sometimes you sort of see threads or you see themes differently after kind of trying to document it?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, the main theme that I took away from all this is how powerful the internet really was. I know this is a theme with the campaign in general, but I feel like it was never really talked about enough, that like it was so democratizing to have this utility that we could use to get around like all of the obstacles of the campaign. Like it was other stuff I noticed. I remember Scott Santens, I think, posted a video one time. This was also like during the media blackout times. And it was a video of Jon Stewart talking about Ron Paul being blacked out. And it really made me think, like, I used to watch The Daily Show like religiously, and I don't remember it. And I was like, oh, you know, I bet this is not the first time this has happened to a candidate. But this is the first time that we have people that are so diligently paying attention and documenting everything that it's really useful to like capture this and remember it, because it's, you know, in future candidates are going to deal with this too. Like anyone who's trying to do anything that's outside of the establishment is going to deal with all these same problems. And I think we're at a really unique place now where we have the internet where we can surpass a lot of this stuff. I mean, the other thing too is like I was watching back a lot of videos, and because Andrew was such a grassroots candidate, like such an unknown candidate, he wasn't on the, like, he didn't have news. He wasn't on the news a lot. And so when he did have like an interview with Maddow or something, we were all like waiting for it. And like people were like,
oh, yeah.
And just for like,
deal.
Yeah. And so we were paying attention to everything so closely that we caught a lot of things that like other candidates that I'm sure were dealing with these same issues weren't catching because they didn't have an army of people like constantly watching everything that happened.
Yeah, he definitely, you know, if you had to visualize, he had the deepest support, you know, maybe not the broadest.
Yeah.
And probably like Beto at the beginning was probably the opposite, like super broad, like everybody kind of likes Beto, but nobody really knows why kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, the thing that I was curious about, my son, both my sons watched the documentary last night, and I made Mrs. Nerd as well, although she's not as into politics as I am.
Yeah.
And it was interesting this morning, my oldest son was really still very kind of upset about the media blackout.
Oh, really?
You know, and, you know, I think as he's starting, you know, he's 12, and I think he's starting to understand racial identity, you know, as an Asian American man, young man now. I think he's like, hey, that's some, why didn't they, you know, why did they do that? Like, if they had done that to like Castro or Harris, would that have been okay? And I was like, no, man, they did that to Harris and put somebody, you know, put Oprah's picture there, or call her, you know, or call her Kamala Jackson, like that would not work.
It's so funny you actually bring up that specific moment, if I could interject for a second, because I was actually watching it with my friend and my sister, and they're not really Yang Gang. I mean, they're like him just fine, but they certainly weren't following anything. And the biggest reaction they had to the entire documentary was the moment where it showed a different Asian man that they put as the photo.
Yeah.
And they gasped so loud, and we're like, "That's not real, right? That's not real." And I was like, "It's real. Like that happened."
And it's not like it's happening on Newsmax or OAN. Like this is MSNBC. This is supposed to be a progressive, diverse, inclusion, all that good stuff.
Right.
And one thing that Ryan, my son, asked me was like, oh, like, do you think that's going to happen again when Yang runs in the future? And I was optimistic. I was like, no, I think he's kind of like established himself now, but I don't know. Like, what do you think? Like, do you think we're like Andrew Yang is still this insurgent, you know, outsider, or do you think the media will take him more seriously, you know, at least for this NYC run?
I think it's going to be harder to ignore him because people know his name and more people are paying attention. But I don't know, because I still don't really understand what caused it. Like, I think that's my biggest frustration, is that I look back at all this and I still have no answers. Like, even that Ariana Pakari interview, I watched that, and she also like didn't really know. And like, I watched a lot of interviews of Yang Gang kind of talking about this, and I was always like I was like, I still don't think I don't feel like it's intentional. Like, it's probably they just don't care. Like, he's just not in their circle, so they're not thinking about him.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I still don't know. I still don't get it. Like, I still don't understand what happened.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm gonna say that like he was on a list of like do not interview, but I was like, why? Like, I can't get it through my head.
Yeah, I don't think it was malicious. I think there was probably some unconscious bias where they just didn't take him seriously. Look, if you're a journalist and you never heard of someone, and they're running, and you know you've got all these other big names running, I'm not surprised that like they're not going to cover 20 people equally.
But it continued.
Okay, yeah, okay, I know. And then on top of that, even as this kind of no name is rising, that person doesn't fit what you have in your mind when you hear presidential candidate, because you grew up watching certain types of people and they didn't look like Andrew Yang, you know. So that's an unconscious thing. And then there's also, I would imagine, like resource allocation. Like if you're gonna prepare. You want to interview people that you think have a good chance of making it. And if you're not in the Yang Gang, you're like, well, yada, yada. And then lastly, I think it's just work. It's work to learn about a new candidate.
Yeah.
And also from a career point of view, you're sticking your neck out there. Like if you're some junior producer, do you want to say to Rachel, like, hey, I think we should get Andrew Yang on, and risk her saying like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? Like, I'm not going to interview Andrew Yang.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, that would be my explanation, like a combination of laziness, unconscious bias, and, actually, resource allocation.
You know what? Laziness. I'm going to go with laziness because also I think it takes a while to understand his policies. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah. And I just don't think people were spending that kind of time. I mean, when he went on like a mainstream news network and they were always asking him like the same 3 questions. It was like, okay, UBI, how are you going to pay for it? Do you actually think you can win? And what do you think of impeachment? Like that, It was just those questions over and over. And it was so frustrating to me because I was like, if you just listen to his stump speech one time or go on his website one time, you can get so many more questions, but it's like they weren't even bothering to do that. And I think that was what's so frustrating. All I wanted during the whole campaign was like, I wish we just could like hack all of the TV networks across the entire country and like put on his stump speech so that everyone just like hears it at one time.
Yeah.
And then we'll get a lot of people.
Yeah. I remember when Ross Perot ran a long time ago, he ended up buying like a huge amount of primetime spot and basically ran like an infomercial. And actually he did okay. Ended up being a factor in the general. But yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I almost wish, now that I think about it, I wish instead of like making commercials, they would have just clipped like a part of his stump speech and played it, especially with like the crowd reaction sometimes. And
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that would have been. I mean, part of it also is there's the folks who are in the gang. I mean, if you're listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, you're already in a different customer segment than like a lot, like let's say the mass majority of people that consume information. So I think we resonate. I mean, look, we're on this Nerds for Humanity channel. Like we've been talking for 22 minutes. Like we have patience.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people don't have that desire. Right. And Yang he's a little bit like the analogy I would draw is like my parents immigrated from Hong Kong. I was born here, but they never understood American football. And for many, many decades, I didn't either. Mm-hmm. And then when I finally kind of understood, like actually I had a friend of mine who I worked with sit next to me and like we would chat about, the Seahawks and stuff. And I would say, well, why do they kneel when they catch the ball on? And what's the story with the salary cap and all this stuff? When you finally get it, then you're like, whoa, this is a super cool sport. But you got to put time into it.
That's true.
And Yang is like that. He is not like, oh, build that wall. Like, oh, I get that. Like he the closest thing would be the money guy. And then that just sounds crazy.
I was going to say, right? And I think that the thing he was known for comes off like a gimmick to people.
Yeah.
You really do have to work. And if someone comes off like gimmicky to you on your first impression of them, you're not going to then go, oh, I'm going to listen to a 3-hour podcast with that guy.
Exactly. So he's gimmicky. It sounds gimmicky.
Yeah.
It's coming from a face and a voice and a look that you're not used to seeing when you hear President of the United States.
That's true.
It's coming from a name you've never heard before.
Yeah.
And you're busy and there's 20 other people. So you're like, oh, Warren, whatever. I
actually almost wish that UBI was framed. Maybe this just popped into my head. Sometimes I wish it was framed around eliminating poverty more than it was about automation. Because with automation, you have to convince people of 2 things then. Because first you have to convince them that there's an automation wave. And then you have to convince them that that's the problem. That's how you solve it. But I think framing it around poverty and homelessness, that's something that's more like a little bit more tangible, almost like people like, I don't know. And I always had better luck yanging people if I came at it from that perspective. And I was just like, don't you feel like there's a lot of money going into these like 5 companies and like a lot of people are very poor? Like, don't you like see that?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah. Or like, a lot of my friends are like stuck in jobs or because of like student debt, and they can't like, you can't switch jobs, you can't buy a house, you can't do all these like life things. And it's like, wouldn't it be nice if you had a little more mobility because you had something that you could like depend on as like a base so that you can like, I don't know, live your potential. You know what I mean?
No,
Actually,
go ahead.
actually, maybe I shouldn't tell the story. Never mind.
No, of course you got to tell it now. Come on, Monica.
Well, I have like a funny, there's like one, so I would also consider myself one of those people that's like living paycheck to paycheck, like a lot of student loan debt, a lot of frustration at kind of like, I was like very driven my whole life, and I feel like I followed the blueprint like exactly how people told me to. And then I ended up here, and I'm just kind of like, I'm never gonna have a house. I'm never gonna pay off my loans. I can't really switch jobs because I don't have, I'm paycheck. Like there's just all these obstacles, and it's kind of funny because the only reason that I was able to make the documentary was because of the stimulus check, because I didn't have a computer, and the stimulus check was enough money to buy a laptop. And so that's the only reason I was, and I know what the counter argument to this is. I know it's okay, well, the government just gave you money and you just gave it to Apple. You just gave it to a big corporation. Like, how is that good for the economy? And it's like, yeah, from a purely economic point of view, yeah, that was like, what's the point of that? But like from a human point of view, like I think there are so many people in this country that have like creative ambitions and like things they want to do that they can't do because they just don't have that like base, you know what I mean? They don't have that like free money that like not free money. They don't have like spare money to spend to like invest in like doing things they wanted to do. If I didn't have a laptop, I wouldn't have been able to make this. So, you know.
Yeah, no, there's definitely, I mean, the creative pursuits, the job kind of job mobility, you know, geographic mobility. A lot of people are like, well, I can't afford to move, you know, I'm kind of stuck in this rut kind of thing. Right. It is interesting, your point about automation. But before I go into that, I want to acknowledge that Nell says that it captured everything we expected to see in a documentary and more. Amazing work. So, yeah, I think the automation thing, if we could do it all over again, yeah, I don't know. I think you're right that a lot of people weren't convinced that automation was going to affect their jobs. It's kind of like climate change. Like it's so far out there that I could show you data on like job dislocation over time,
right,
correlated with the introduction of technology. That's going to convince like the 38 people watching this live stream right now. Right. But if you go to like, you know, millions of people, they're gonna be like, I don't know, you know, like technology's been around a while, like my job's fine, like really, there's never gonna be a self-driving truck, yada yada.
I got stuck on that point a lot too. People were like, well, they're further away from self-driving trucks than they think. Like it's actually, they have to make still like a lot of technological leaps and stuff. And it's like further away than Yang said. I was like, great. That's not really the point though. Now we're getting stuck in this argument about self-driving trucks when we're talking about a big game, like society game-changing idea. So I was just a little frustrated that I always had to overcome that convincing people of automation before anything else.
Yeah, I agree. And I think in a way, automation was a nice handle to kind of introduce basic income, but it almost kind of undersells the kind of holistic need for it.
Right.
And that, of course, automation and the job dislocation because of that is something that we'll need to deal with. But there's also the argument around like, well, what about the person taking care of their mom or taking care of their kids? Or what about the person that's in between jobs or that, you know, wants to pursue more volunteer work or artistic endeavors? And then there's the whole libertarian argument, which I find very compelling, which is like, hey, if you're going to tax me, then give it to people. Don't have it just get consumed by a bureaucracy of like weird rules and everything.
Right.
And yeah, I think those were other angles that we could have tried. You know, I'm sure if you picked any of those, like if you picked the poverty angle, you would have immediately been labeled a communist, right? And then if you pick the libertarian angle, you're going to be called a Trojan horse for the right. You know,
we had this problem anyway. I mean, we had this problem anyway.
That's true as well. Yeah. Um,
No, go on.
well, I was just gonna say, like, as you put the documentary together, if you had to summarize like 2 or 3 of the key kind of themes that emerged,
Yeah.
What would they be?
Well, the one is definitely the democratization of the internet, which is something that I've been passionate about and like fascinated by for years. It's actually like kind of what I did my like grad school thesis on. And so this is something that I just find fascinating, the way we interact with each other, the way you can like build communities online, and especially this one that completely like had real life implications, like in the real world, we like really changed things. That's why I really loved one of my favorite sections is the one where people talk. It was like towards the beginning of the documentary where they were talking about Twitter and how like they would trend these things and tie them with fundraising, and then it propelled him. Like then we raised real money that could then be used to like fund offices in early states and like really like skyrocket the campaign. Like that was a big deal. So that was one of them. Another one is just like the power. Well, the media bias also was like a huge theme, narrative. and then also I'd say, oh God, I just wrote this down. And then the third one is just, I guess, the power like of an idea and just like being genuine. Another frustration, the way that I was able to like yang kind of Republicans in my life actually had more to do with like him as an authentic human being than anything. Like people came up to me afterwards and they were like, I don't agree with him on everything.
Right.
But I like get how he thinks.
Yeah.
And that's better than like politicians that are saying nothing all the time.
Yeah. I had a lot of people say that to me too, say something along the lines of, I actually don't agree with that UBI thing, but I like him.
It was the friend that I watched it with last night. She's a conservative. Did the same thing like 3 times. She always felt like she had to like precede any thought with that. She's like, listen, I don't agree with him, but but I like him. But I like him. And I she also kept saying like, this is how politics should work. Like as she was watching it, she was like, people coming together and like trying to elect a candidate is how politics should work, not like.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a little almost like the inverse of Trump, where there are people who say, I don't really like him, but I'm for his policies.
Right. You're right.
And he really is the opposite of Trump. But at any rate, hopefully we won't have to talk about that gentleman for a long time. So tell me a little bit about the power of the internet, because as I was watching it, on the one hand, I was like so amazed that you had all these people basically, trending on Twitter and creating these memes and doing all this crazy stuff and creating content. And and I was like, wow, that came out of nowhere. That wasn't like organized by the campaign. It was all kind of grassroots. On the other hand, it's like, well, but Iowa, we got 5% before the first allocation. Like, so we can trend on Twitter all day long. But it wasn't just trending though, because we could talk to reporters. Like you could actually have real interactions with people who were like I think that's one of the things, because I was also new to Twitter, so I didn't know how any of this stuff works. The reputation of Twitter is that it's just like awful. I don't know. Like none of my friends are on Twitter. They're like, why would you be on there? Like, why would you? I don't understand. And what I found so fascinating about it is like if you're only reading the news, like if you just like go online and read an article, then you're just getting this one person's like projection of a story and how they feel it went down. When you get something on Twitter, you get live reactions. If people can like object to something they see in the article, they can be like, oh, you actually got that wrong. Hey, you forgot someone. Hey, why are you using that adjective to describe this person? We saw this yesterday where Yang tweeted an article. Did you see this? Oh no, I missed this one.
Oh, God, it was something. It was like Lindsey Graham. Oh God, I don't remember. It was something like Lindsey Graham pushes McConnell to like do the stimulus or something. I don't know. Yang posted it and had like a comment that was like positive. It was like great. And then they changed the title of the article at some point to say something like completely the opposite. And now Yang had tweeted it, so it looked like he was backing whatever the title of that article was. But on Twitter, so like, but you have people that can object to it and be like, hey, this is what you wrote before. Like there's more of a dialogue where you can kind of dissect like whether or not things are true. You know what I mean? Like when there were articles posted about Yang, if you're only reading it on the news, you're only getting people's this whatever that journalist decided to say about him. On Twitter, you actually like see other opinions. And there were so many tweets throughout the whole campaign process where people were like, their minds were changed because like Gang Gang were nice to them. I used to collect these tweets. I have like 10 pages of tweets around the time of the like around the time of January where people were like, you know, I didn't like Yang, but their supporters are being so nice to me and like they make some good points and like, all right, fine. Like I like him. And maybe we weren't getting high enough numbers to ever do better than 5% in Iowa, but it was something. I don't know. It helped somewhat.
Oh, I mean, for sure. The fact, I think it no question for money raising, I think it was useful. And getting to 5%, you know, is nothing to sneeze at if you start from nowhere. On the other hand, you do wonder, and maybe this is why a lot of us went through kind of the post-suspension, you know, stages of grief, because I think we all felt that energy. But I also think in some ways we were in a bit of our own echo chamber.
I do agree with that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I remember interviewing someone who had just come back from Iowa before the Iowa caucus. And I was like, hey, the poll's not looking great for Yang. So I'm hoping he finishes 5th in Iowa, 4th in New Hampshire, 3rd in Nevada, 2nd in South Carolina. And they're like, no, you're way too skeptical. Like he's going to get number 1 in Iowa. And I was like, I don't know how that's going to happen. Like, who are these people they're calling in the polls? Oh, the polls are wrong. And so like, how do we, do you think like, how do we broaden this so that we're not this little faction?
I actually, you make a really good point actually. And this is something I experienced as well, because I had a friend who probably I talked the most actively about this, who was always we were always he didn't believe in Yang at all. So when I first brought him up, he was like mad at me. And he's like, don't support that guy. He's not going to go anywhere. Just like support the person that's going to beat Trump. And I'm like, what does that even mean? He was like, Pete. And I was like, I don't know. But anyway, like I remember him asking me that too about like Iowa. He's like, how do you actually think he's going to do in Iowa? And I was like, I think he's going to be like top 3. I think he's going to be top 3. And he's like, you're insane. What is that based off of? And I was like, well, we have people flooding the state. I was like, I don't know. There was that example from years ago with that, with the peanut farmer. Who was that? The peanut farmer president?
Jimmy Carter?
I don't remember.
Yeah. Jimmy Carter, I think, is the only peanut farmer president we've had.
Maybe it's not that person. There was some story years ago where a bunch of like 1,000 people flooded Iowa from like other states the same way they did, and then propelled this person to victory. So I like really believed, and part of being in the Yang Gang is like kind of believing in the impossible, but then at the end we were wrong. And I don't know. I actually don't know how to. I don't know how to expand. Like I don't know how to get out of the bubble. I don't know how to. I don't know. And the poll stuff, we were so convinced that the polls were wrong and they were right. And it's the same thing with the election, like the general election. Like there's this narrative that all the polls were wrong, but I think you did an episode on this. And I think I listened to a podcast once where they actually went back and looked at them, and they actually were pretty accurate. So
they said it was going to be super close. It was going to be Biden by a nose, and that's kind of what happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there is a bit of confirmation bias there. I remember that Emerson poll where it was like,
I deleted that at the last second.
That was such an exciting moment. That was like my high point in the whole campaign, because I was like, oh, we finally reached escape velocity, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, even as I was looking at it, in the back of my mind, I was like, Tom, this is one poll.
Yeah.
But you really want to believe, right?
Right.
And I think we got to be careful about that. That's why even for the New York mayor run, on the bright side, the polls are showing Yang is technically in the lead.
Yeah.
But they're also showing like it's a 17%, you know, he's number 1 with 17% support. So there's a lot of movement and 40% undecided. So it's a big, wide field. New York's, you know, a jungle. Like it's going to be intense. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the next run? Like, are you excited about it, or are you? What do you think?
No, I don't want the mayor run. I'm all for. Well, I don't know if I want to get into this,
Of
but
course you should, Monica. Come on.
I don't understand. Like maybe it's because I've been working on this doc all year, so I've just been watching 2019 campaign footage, and it just I think he built so much energy around a national movement that I can't wrap my head around just kind of being like, okay, now I'm gonna like pay attention to like I don't know what like I don't know. It doesn't jive with me. I think he built something that was like really special and really really unique that that doesn't come along very often. It's like a once in a generation type of movement, and to kind of I don't see a path for like 2024 if he's mayor, and I can't imagine going through the 2024 election without him there. Like I can't imagine imagine doing this entire primary process all over again, but there's no Yang. Like isn't that horrifying? Like I don't know how to do that.
Well, I guess your friend would say Pete might be available.
That's right? That's what they want still.
I this mayoral run for me, I also have mixed feelings about it. I will say this, I think it's a very selfless thing for Yang to do this, because I suspect what's driving this for him is how can I make the most positive impact on people? And on the one hand, yes, he has a national energy, but getting the nomination for the president of the United States is really, really hard.
Yeah, that's
you
true.
know? And so like, if you're a betting man, he wouldn't get the nomination in 2024. And if you want to bet on a third party, like that's even longer odds.
Yeah. I would also make the argument though, we would be starting, like, look at how far we got from a no name to like 6th place in the Democratic primary.
Yeah.
If we were to run again, we're not starting from scratch again. We're starting from where we left off. So imagine like the acceleration of like how the Yang Gang grew. Every time he got any kind of like press or whatever, there would be like a wave. Like you would see it. Like all of a sudden, like all these people were talking about it. All of a sudden, Google searches would skyrocket, and people were like, "Whoa!" Like I think there are still so many potential Yang Gang out there that just don't know because they didn't listen to Rogan that day, or like maybe they wouldn't, like people that just happen to not have stumbled on him, that would be really passionately Yang Gang. And if we start, like we're only gonna grow. Like if he runs again, we're not gonna lose people, I don't think. So if we have that same pattern of growth, but we start from where we left off, I think we could have like a really, really tremendous, impactful movement where like even if we don't win, we can still accelerate these ideas enough and like show how screwed up the system is because he's talking about things that no one else is talking about. And I just can't imagine going through a 2024 election where we're not talking about any of these things. It's just going to be a bunch of platitudes again, and we're going to lose. I mean, there was so much urgency in his voice, especially in the early days of the campaign, where it was like, there was a really good quote that I'm actually a little disappointed I didn't include in the doc, where someone asked him, like, why doesn't he just run for mayor? I think it was on the H3 podcast, actually. Why don't you climb the political ladder? Like, it makes no sense to jump right to president. And he was basically very passionately spoke about like not having enough time. He's like, I don't have the time to climb the political ladder. And so if he didn't have time 4 years ago, and we just had a global pandemic that accelerated all of the problems he was talking about, then why do we suddenly have time to like climb the political ladder now? I guess that's
but both could be true. Like we may not have time, and you may have no choice but to climb the political ladder. It's like, okay, yes, it's an urgent situation, but like the way we pick presidents requires this long, elaborate process.
Right.
And there's a lot of other people that want that job. And there's infrastructure in place that, we don't have as much as others, yada, yada, yada. I mean, I agree with you. Going from 0 to 5 is super impressive. You could argue, well, hey, if you extend that line, it should get you to maybe 3rd place or 2nd place or who knows in Iowa.
Yeah.
There's another argument, which is like, oh, it's like a stock that goes from $0 to $5, and then it kind of like that's its ceiling. We don't know. I mean, I would hope that with the CNN stuff and obviously the pandemic's emphasis of the importance of cash relief, it could only have brightened Yang Star. But that's going again from maybe 5 to 10%. Like you need 40, 50%.
Right.
To be the 2024 nominee at the end of the day. And that's, you know, there's a lot of other people that are going to be running. So I kind of take my hat off to Andrew for going for this New York mayor thing, because it's not the smart play. Like for a career point of view, like if you lose, it's going to be really everybody's going to know it. It's a really nasty kind of set of problems you're going to have to solve. They're going to be highly charged. It's going to be just as kind of Byzantine a system probably as Iowa was, but even more. It's going to be expensive. You're going to have to use all the Yang Gang energy. And so there's all these reasons, like if I were a friend of Andrew's, I would be like, bro, I don't know if this is the right call for you. But if he said, hey, Tom, what I want to do is optimize for helping people. Yeah. Then I would say, well, if you want to optimize for helping people, you're probably going to have more chance of helping people by running for NYC mayor than going for third party or 2024 Democratic nomination. I do wonder if so I would say the one counter, maybe not even counter. I mean, I don't even necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but one thing I do wish is I wish he would talk about it, because I still don't understand what his, like, we're speculating a lot about what he's thinking about this and why he's doing it, but we don't know why. And I just want him to explain why. Maybe that would like help ease any qualms I have about this, because I don't get it. Like I don't get it. My main takeaway from his entire candidacy was not, obviously he didn't become president, so that wasn't my takeaway, but I still feel like a fundamentally different person for having my eyes opened to all that he was talking about. And I think, maybe he wouldn't win the next time around either, but maybe you could get a whole new army of people to like wake up to this and be like, oh yeah, like the things he's talking about are like very important, and we all feel it. Like we all know that like everything about the system is broke. Everyone I talk to, either side, are like mad at the duopoly. Like everyone is. But there's no one talking about ranked choice voting on a national level, so that like we don't know what the solutions are. It's just a lot of people that are like really, really frustrated, but there's no one giving them an answer. So if he's like hiding away in New York for the next couple of years, there are like big problems in New York, and I'm sure he can help a lot of people in New York, but he's going to be very focused on local issues. He's going to be very focused on like, that's going to take a lot of his time and his energy. And if he's not giving 100% of it to the mayorship, then maybe he shouldn't even be running. So if he's giving 100% of his energy to that, I don't know. It's like we have all these like other big national problems that are not going to be given any attention to, because he's the only one that's talking about them. Well, let me play out 2 scenarios for you and see what you think. Okay. So scenario 1 is we say, hey, you are right now in the top tier of candidates for the mayoral race. You have a very strong base of support in New York. You have the national Yang Gang kind of movement they're going to help you out for sure. Yeah. And if you can get there, so if you can win, you could try to pilot a basic income experiment. You can try and show what a data-driven leadership style looks like. And from there, you can do lots of things, and you'll have a bigger platform than you might have otherwise. Scenario 2 is you stay on CNN, you stay doing the Humanity Forward stuff, and you go for 2024 primary. You maybe finish, instead of 6th, you finish maybe 4th, maybe 3rd, probably 4th. And then you're still not going to get the nomination. And you're not going to get ranked choice voting, and you're not going to get basic income. Like, I don't know. Like it's not crazy. The New York City thing is not nuts. Like when you think about it that way, right? I've thought about it a lot. I think about this a lot. And I'm frustrated because I want to hear him explain it. Like I want to hear his rationale for this. I just don't know who, someone on one of these shows, maybe it was your show, I can't remember, Paget's show,
were talking about this where they were talking about how Michael Tubbs didn't get reelected, even though he had that universal basic income pilot or whatever. And they were talking about how, like, yeah, the people that vote in mayoral primaries aren't the people that care about that kind of stuff. They care about, like, the potholes in the road and who's endorsed by the unions and like all these other very local politics. But I mean, not a lot of people vote in primaries, and not a lot of people are like actively paying attention to what the mayor is doing. And I don't know. It all just seems so like, I just don't understand I don't know.
Well, I mean, surely you would agree that, no offense to Stockton, but New York City is kind of a different order of magnitude in terms of power and prestige and challenge. So, like, if he could get something done in New York, well, number one, he's a New Yorker. Like, it's giving back to probably America's most important city. And I know people are probably saying, well, look at Bloomberg and Giuliani. Okay, I get that you can show me examples of New York mayors that didn't become president, but there are lots of examples of people who ran nonprofits that didn't become president.
Oh, I actually don't like that whole idea of using past examples to predict.
Yeah, there's only 45 of them. Like, come on.
Right, exactly. And also, like, yeah, you're right. Like, a no name also never got to 6th place based on people activating on Twitter. Like, that also never happened. But that's also what I'm saying is that you
want to hear him walk us through the
I want to hear him walk us through it. And also, just one of the other coolest things about this campaign was how like bold it was, and how like we just kind of went after things that were like completely impossible. And then I don't know, it was like so inspiring in that sense. So I guess there's something about the mayoral run that's just like,
yeah, I mean, it's not quite as audacious as trying to get into the White House. But if you had to graph out like how audacious something is, and then how like achievable it is.
Yeah.
Mayor is kind of a nice mix. It's still a pretty big job, but you know, there's a line of sight to him getting that done.
Right.
Whereas to get into the White House, like literally 100 things have to come your way.
Yeah.
You know, over the next, 5 years. And so that's just, it's a tough one.
Or just either a lot of things have to go right, or just one catalyst has to happen, and all of a sudden everything changes. I mean, after the pandemic, like, you've seen how much the universal basic income is like skyrocketed in approval, and all of a sudden people that don't even like Yang or talking about Yang are like talking about how cash relief makes so much more sense than doing these bureaucratic specific programs. So we have people that are like, the movement is still building, and even though we're not even like, I want to say we're not trying, but like we're not even in a race, and we still have people that are at least subconsciously becoming Yang Gang. And so there's just so much momentum and potential and energy still here that I just like, it's so hard for me to like watch it kind of not crumble, but like not be extracted to its full potential.
There's this really useful concept that was popularized by Bezos. Have you heard of his one-way door argument?
No.
So basically, what he advocates is like, when you're making a hard decision, if it's a two-way door, don't like worry as much about it as opposed to if it's a one-way door. In this case, I mean, if he runs for mayor and he doesn't get it, but he runs a really great campaign and he gets out there and more people talk about him outside of our bubble, like, he could still, like, 2024 is still multiple years away.
Actually, maybe you have a better opinion on this, because I've talked about this to people and I don't fully. What do you think of this timeline? Because the mayorship would start in January 2022?
Yeah, I think so.
So he would have to start campaigning for presidency like a year later. You can't leave your post a year into a mayorship. That just makes him look like another politician.
So you're assuming that he's going to win in NYC already?
I mean, I think, I don't know.
Because, like, the decision tree, he could run and lose, and then of course Iowa awaits him. He could run and win, and then we get to your point, which is like, well, but then you can't just like win and then like say, okay, I'm out of here. I agree with you on that one. I agree with you that it would be hard for him to do it. Is there precedence? Yeah, there is. Like, Obama, pretty soon after he got into the Senate, became a presidential candidate.
Yeah.
And, it wouldn't be out of the question, although I think it partly could also depend on the support. Like, he would need to get drafted. He couldn't go out there and say, oh, great, I won mayor, now I want to run for president. He would need to just focus on New York. And then everyone would need to say, like, man, that Yang is doing such a great job in New York. Like, we need him. The time is now. We demand you run, Andrew. Right. And then he would say, like, oh, I really can't do that. And then we say, no. So I think there's a path to getting to Iowa from New York.
You actually, you make a good point, because someone had brought this up too, where they were like, as soon as they start running the 20, how they run those speculative polls about who's going to run in 2024. As soon as they start running those polls, if they're like including Yang in them, that's already kind of like at least it's in the narrative then that he could run. So it won't look like completely crazy if he does. I don't know. I guess my thing about everything is like, is this going to be an obstacle to a 2024 run? And if it is, then I don't like the idea. Is basically
yeah. Well, but if your outcome that you were optimizing for were not necessarily running in 2024, but the most people positively affected, then mayor of the biggest city in the country.
Listen, you make a good point. And this is actually, my mom, again, came up to me one day after she had heard that Yang was like filing his papers or whatever. And she was so excited. And so my conservative mom was so happy about this and like energized. Like, I haven't seen her like this, because she's like, finally someone can go in there and fix it. Cause she's been like so upset. We're like from right outside the city. So it's like, it's mildly relevant to us. And so she was just like so fired up about it. She's like, thank God. He's like, at least like someone sane can get in there and try to fix what's going on. And so, yeah, I mean, there's definitely positive impact there. So I'm not like, I don't fully hate it. I get it, especially if you want to hate people. Maybe it's just me, because I've just never seen a movement that was this kind of like blindly optimistic and ambitious on impossible goals. Like, I just find that so inspiring. And so maybe it's just me wanting to do that again. Like, I don't know.
No, I mean, I hear you. Like, it is definitely a quote unquote smaller stage than the national stage, but I mean, it's still 8 million people that live there, and just the kind of the size of the budget, the size of the infrastructure. I mean, it's a pretty big deal. So, I think it could be a really nice feather in his cap. So then he's like, oh, I ran companies, I ran a nonprofit, I was the mayor, I ran for president before. He sounds so much more credible when you add, oh, I was the mayor of New York City. Like, yeah, if that's the only thing you've done, then mayor of New York City is like, well, I don't know if that's that impressive. But when you have all that other stuff and you have it in the package of Andrew Yang, and then you have the Yang Gang kind of like behind you, that's a pretty potent, maybe not a 2024, but it could be a potent 2028 candidate. Like, who knows? Oh no, you don't want to wait.
I just can't imagine doing the 2024 election without Yang. It's such a crazy idea to me. And I will say, you just reminded me of something. Do you remember that New York Times interview where they were doing the endorsements? And he had like a phenomenal interview, like better than all the interviews. And then at the end, they kind of like dismissed him and were just kind of like, yeah, I hope he runs for New York City mayor or something. And I was so mad at them for saying that. And so now for him to run to mayor, it's like proving them right.
Well, I mean, having the New York Times root for you for mayor is not a terrible thing. I mean, and that New York City economy, the GDP of New York City is like over $2 trillion.
Yeah,
like, it is. We're not talking about like Stockton is great and they're doing innovative stuff, and obviously Buttigieg was a mayor of somewhere in Indiana, but like New York City's like a little country almost.
That's true.
I want to recognize Vaughn, who says he just finished your documentary and he loved the freedom dividend recipient part. I also enjoyed that as well.
Yeah. Just
what?
people laughing at him right before that.
Oh yeah, well that part was very upsetting. And so, but tell me a little bit about that freedom dividend recipient part. Like, what did you know you want to include that part from the beginning? Because there were very moving stories.
Oh, that's really interesting that you thought that. No, that was actually kind of like a last minute thing, just because I wanted to show exactly. Like, I loved how on that debate stage when they were laughing at him or whatever, I loved how like passionately Paget was talking about how like politicians kind of spend all this money just for themselves, and like in reality they could help people. So I just wanted to show the people that, because then I think right between that's the debate section and the freedom dividend recipient part, there's like a small interview where he does, I think with Chris Cuomo, where Chris asks him, do you really even want to do this job? Like, you know, we're just going to come after you all the time. You have a nice family, you have a nice life. Like, why even bother? And he was like, you know, there are these problems, and if no one else is going to solve them, then I'm going to solve them. And then that led into him solving them. So it was just kind of like, it had to do with the flow of the story more than anything. I just wanted to show that he was taking initiative to actually try to help people, you know? And they were beautiful stories. I didn't see that video during the campaign, actually. I only saw yeah. And the story, there were more stories. I mean, obviously all the people told stories. I only cut a couple into it because but I mean, that one guy that was talking about being homeless and how he was giving all the money to his friend who was homeless when he was, and it was just like so heartbreaking. And like I didn't know why that didn't get more attention. Like, that was a good story. But this is what I was talking about too, about UBI being framed around like poverty too. Like,
certainly in the primary, like if you care about people getting left behind, a basic income would almost by definition be the most kind of efficient way.
It seems like yeah, go on.
Yeah, and so it seems very, very ultra progressive.
Yeah.
But I do think, much like the MSNBC junior assistant producer who's just trying to scrap together graphics and doesn't want to get in trouble and is lazy and or doesn't have time.
Yeah.
I would imagine there are also dyed-in-the-wool Democrats who are just convinced job training programs, college loans, Head Start, food stamps, like these are just the things that we as Democrats do because we care. And it's the other side that doesn't care. And the notion of like, well, wait a minute, what about something else? What about another way to get at that end is like kind of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And it's going to take some time. And it didn't help that, like, you know, even AOC was like saying it's a Trojan horse. And it's like, oh my God, seriously?
There was another one of my like favorite quotes in the doc was Yang said something about how a neuroscientist told him that the biggest obstacle to over like universal basic income is the human mind. And it is just like, you know, like what you said, even with like the poverty stuff, like even when I talked to my friends about that, sometimes there was also a hurdle there because they were like it sounds like too easy of a solution. Like just people money. It's like, that can't be right. Cause there's so it's always like, no, there's something wrong with them. And we have to like, have, I don't know. There's always like, it just sounds too easy, I guess. And we've been taught that it's like a pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of society, and people just need, I don't know. Oh, actually, this is I think a better way to put it. People are always like, what's the saying with the give a man a fish?
Oh, give the man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man a fish, he'll eat for a lifetime.
Right. So people are like, well, you can't just give the man the fish, like the money. But I always thought of it in reverse. I was like, the money is the that's like it's like, I don't know how to explain this. If we had all the kind of like organizations, like the volunteer organizations that are like helping homeless people, like feeding homeless people and whatever, if we had a UBI and those organizations, instead of just like providing soup and housing and whatever, if they were providing financial services, setting up bank accounts, teaching people what to do with their money, teaching people, like if you had that kind of foundation and those organizations could switch their role from like providing just like food all the time or whatever necessities and switch it to those people actually teaching them how to like get up on their feet because they have something, they have like a floor to stand on.
Mm-hmm.
That's a more compelling, like that makes more sense to me. Like that's a compelling narrative. It's like the guy said in the freedom dividend section where he was like, you know, if I show up to a job with a, you know,
right, all my possessions.
Yeah. He's like, I'm not getting a job. So it's like if you just provide people, and there's a, I mean, in the, what is it? We're guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or whatever. There's an argument to be made that like basic necessities so that you can just like eat and survive and whatever are part of that. They're just like what you should be guaranteed as just like a citizen of the country.
Yeah, not to mention like, what if the person's like allergic to fish? Or what if they live in an area near no bodies of water? Or what if everybody starts fishing and then there's no more fish? There's like, no, I don't want you to teach me to fish. I want you to give me resources and for me to make the decision on what's best for me and for my situation.
Right.
And that's why I'm always suspicious of like, no, we will design a job guarantee and we will tell you what to do. It's like, you don't know shit, dude. Like, even if you have the best intentions, the economy is complex. The country is huge and complex. Like, your single, oh, everyone's going to learn how to become a data scientist plan is like not going to work in every state. But I do also think there is another kind of underlying bigotry, which is, oh, well, we don't think the poor people are going to make the right decisions.
Right.
There's a lack of trust.
There is.
And that's where like the libertarian in me is like, I don't care. I'm going to give people money. They're going to make their own calls. And some of them, some of them are going to make bad decisions, but that's life. And that's better than trying to have like a national fishing training school.
Right. I mean, that's true.
I hope Andrew continues to, it'll be interesting to see how hard he pivots to local issues. Because if I'm a New York voter, I don't want to hear about automation unless it affects New York in a very specific way. Right.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what I was saying before, where I want him to kind of take us through his platform or whatever, because I don't understand. Like, I just don't think, I don't know. I don't know.
There are some things that could translate, like the scorecard, a scorecard for New York City.
Yeah.
Data transparency for the police force, cameras for the police officers.
Yeah.
Basic income would be actually really useful for all the dislocated people and the coronavirus like recovery.
Yeah.
And then really sort of rolling up his sleeves and being an operator when it comes to vaccination, kind of making sure that goes smoothly. Like, there's a lot of things he could do to demonstrate that kind of Yang energy and freshness and competence at the New York level. The biggest one he'll have to put aside is maybe the big focus on automation. Like, I don't know that's, I mean, he can work it in, but he can't make that his main thing.
It's funny because that was his like origin story.
Yes, it was.
It's like to abandon that. So that kind of gets into the whole thing where I just feel like some of the stuff that like drove his campaign initially are going to be abandoned for this, and that kind of.
Well, maybe. I mean, a lot of jobs in New York City are in the financial services, and those are being automated. Legal jobs are getting automated, so I don't think he has to abandon it, but he can't start every conversation as the robots are coming guy.
You know what my favorite policy was actually the one that like really kind of sold me. It was the American exchange program because for a while, I mean, during the 2016 election, that was kind of when I checked out of politics, and it had a lot to do with the fact that at the time I had to move home. So I was actually living in New York at the time, but I just finished grad school and my loans kicked in and I couldn't afford it anymore. So I like had to move home, and which was like really like depressing. That just kind of felt like a failure. And that was kind of the first time I was like so mad that people had kind of been telling me my whole life that I should do the path this way. And I did it exactly what they told me to. And I ended up in this spot where I was completely stuck.
Yeah.
But I moved home, but my parents live in like a very rural, like Trump country, Trump banners, boat parades, the whole thing. But I was working in New York City in an office that was literally, and don't get me wrong, I love these people, but these are like we were working for the 1%. And like our office overlooked the venue that Hillary would be having her like election night party at. Like it was so every single day I was confronted with like deep red rural Trump people and like the kind of winners of the economy, like blue urban elites. And kind of just like listening to the conversations happening on both sides, they were just like wildly, it was like living in two different countries. I was like, you're not even talking, you're not even hearing the election information the same way. Because the people that were in New York were hearing this narrative about how Trump was just like always saying these crazy things. And then in the country, they were like, God, I hate politicians, and I'm so angry at them that I want to elect someone that they hate. You know what I mean? Like they just wanted to attack the system. They didn't
own the libs. Yeah,
exactly. So, but neither of them understood each other. So that's why when I heard the American exchange policy, I was like, I wish everyone could experience what I was experiencing right now, where I was dealing with both worlds all the time, because I think right now these silos are so damaging.
It is incredible how it's like going to another planet. Like just a couple weeks ago, so I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is a pretty blue part of the country.
Yeah.
And so I want the kids were missing Switzerland, so they like snow. So I was like, I'll drive you east to some snow.
Yeah.
And so we drove to the eastern part of California, and it was crazy. There are still Trump signs all over the place. And my son was like, "Oh, Dad, how come there's so many pickup trucks here?" And I was like, "Dude, this is Trump country right here." Because they had the pickup trucks with the blue. It's like the technicals, like they were just driving around.
Yeah. And
then my other son was like, "Oh, well, isn't the election over? Like it's December? Like what's going on?" And I was like, "Well, this is a different perspective here. People feel very strongly about their views, and I agree with you that my kids will get some more exposure to the other side and vice versa, because it's very easy for us now to be like, well, those are just some crazy dudes in the eastern part of California, and not really try and understand like what, because maybe their economy is very different than, Silicon Valley, and they feel very strongly about what they feel is like an attack on their values or their heritage or whatever.
Right.
And we just don't get access to that. We stay in our bubbles, like kind of we were talking about before. So I agree with you. That was a great policy.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll hear more about that one. I mean, for me, yeah.
Carry on.
I was going to say, for me, the vocational training was my favorite one.
That was what convinced I had a friend who was also, I was trying to Yang for like a while. She's a little more like, I guess like establishment Democrat, and also like a big Pete guy. And I was like, please just listen to the Rogan episode. Like, I think you're going to love it. And she didn't say much about it. She didn't like communicate much about it. But at one point when she heard the vocational training thing, she got so revved up. She sent me like text after text after. She's like, this is exactly what I've been talking about. I've been like, her husband's a teacher, and so he's also like very passionate about stuff too. And that was the turning point. So yeah, there are a lot of good. Yeah, there are a lot of.
He could do that in New York.
That's
the
true.
Vocational stuff.
That's true.
So I mean, it's I know you're. It's a process, and it feels like a consolation prize, but it's New York. I mean, New York's a pretty big deal.
Wait, I think you actually opened my eyes to something just now as I was explaining this, because I think maybe the anti-mayor thing has to do with the fact that it is just like a blue place. Like, I actually think if he was running for governor of New York, I would be way more intrigued by that, because then at least you're dealing with the two,
or senator. Kirsten Gillibrand's seat's coming up in a couple years.
A couple years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe there's hope. Let me get to some, Monica. I know we've been talking for a while. I want to get to some audience questions. Do you have a few minutes to hit them real quick?
Yeah.
First question from Vaughn. Are you planning on growing your YouTube channel?
Oh, you know what? That's an interesting question. I haven't thought that much about it because I've been so singularly focused on just finishing this one thing. But actually, lately, there are like topics that I've wanted to dive in deeper. And there's also like so much interesting footage. Like I've just been clipping stuff constantly from like current event stuff too. And there are some other stories that I would like to explore and kind of like one of them is all these politicians that were advocating for the stay-at-home orders, but then you saw that they were like in Cabo or like there's so much good like footage of that, and I was like, oh, I want someone to compile all that in like a compelling way, or like they're just like little stories that have intrigued me, so I could see that being a thing, but I haven't given it that much thought.
All right, well, I'm sure people will be excited to see as you upload more, if you upload more stuff. I mean, just that documentary alone was pretty awesome. In fact, Dino wants to know, would you consider submitting it to a film festival, or now that it's sort of publicly available, does that preclude you from doing that, or how does that work? I
don't know anything about this, but people ask me about this. I have no answer. I know that because Ching also is working on a documentary, and I was talking to her, and I think she wants to do film festivals or something. And she made a comment at one point that said like they like to have like the premiere, and have like the thing in. I don't know. So I don't know.
Yeah, I would imagine it would help to be an exclusive, but I know Ching's doing a watch party or thing, a premiere on YouTube. So maybe she's run the numbers and said, yeah, it doesn't help with the film festival thing, but like, you know, at the end of the day, you want to get reach too, and then have your work seen.
Yeah, I could also improve it and put it in.
There you go.
There are so many things that, my God, I'm sure people notice this. I mean, there's a lot of stuff technically wrong. I mean, there's like the sound is like all over the place. Sometimes the music's too loud. The wrong screens came up at one point. I don't know if anyone noticed this, but when the 7th debate starts, it says it's the first debate, and I was so mad at myself for that.
Because I didn't notice it.
Okay, I didn't notice it until after it uploaded, and it was just this 1 second, and I couldn't re-upload the whole thing, and it's so frustrating.
Oh, you know, you'll never be happy with it. So I agree with you. Like, I'm sure you could do another version.
Yeah.
But a question from Paul. Can the Yang Gang help you?
With my next project? Yeah, if I figure out what the next project is. Yeah.
All right. So maybe when you and Ching apply for your respective film festivals, the Yang Gang can kind of nominate, or maybe they can help you kind of, you know, lobby for it. I don't know.
Yeah, I do wonder. I don't know much about this world at all. Although I love it. I really do want to get into like this video editing and making this stuff because it was so much fun. I mean, I've never been more passionate about doing anything. I mean, I did this nonstop for like 10 months. So it is something that I do love doing. But yeah, also with the film festival stuff, I don't know what the rules. I mean, these are YouTube screen recordings. Like I don't know. This isn't like high quality, good documentary footage. This is like, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there are different types of film festivals. Like, you don't need to go against like you know, the kind of crazy, you know, National Geographic documentaries. But yeah, you know, who knows? Maybe there are some that are for you know, documentary grad students or user generated stuff, because I agree with you. I think there's something there. Like there's a space between just random YouTube videos like mine, and then Ken Burns, and I'm guessing there's probably you know, some festivals in the middle.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we should wrap it up here, but I wanted to just ask you before we do so, is there anything else you wanted to share or observe or ask questions of the audience, or let us know about whatever that you think would be useful?
Not really, to be honest. I'm just so happy this is finally out. Like, I really can't express to you how much of this life, how much of my life this has consumed. And like, I'm so happy people are watching it and enjoying it. And I really want people to see it that aren't Yang Gang. I think that was kind of a big objective as well. Like when I was thinking about how to put this footage together, it was always like, how do I put this together so that like my friends who weren't Yang Gang would finally understand what this movement even was? Because that was my frustration this whole time, where like even if I could talk someone into liking Yang, I knew that they didn't understand. Like they were like, yeah, okay, I like him. Like I had friends that were like, okay, I'll vote for him. Like I like him. I've come around on UBI, whatever. But they still never really understand. They never grasped this, like the emotional ride we were on, the challenge we face as like a democracy. You know, one of my favorite lines in the doc too is when Paget is it's before the December debate. So it's that same video you were talking about. Paget and Kai. But earlier on, you know, Paget's like getting really frustrated because the polls aren't coming out. And she's like, you know, it's not even about Andrew Yang's candidacy anymore. And that's like how I felt about a lot of these like lessons that we learned. Like there were so many lessons we learned about how just screwed up this process is, where it's not even about necessarily, I mean, of course it is about Andrew Yang, but it's also just about like, look at how many problems. Like I tried to present this in a way where like someone who didn't care about politics could watch this as just like a human story of like, look at these like people that came together on the internet and they're like wrapping trucks and like making it's like cool and fun to watch. But you like take away afterwards where like you kind of sit with some of this stuff and some of the stuff they talked about and be like, you know what, there really are some problems here that we really need to kind of like tackle. Like I wanted to inspire people to do that. So
yeah, in a way it was inspiring and tragic at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was inspiring because you saw these people come out of nowhere and you know, go to Iowa and wrap trucks and phone bank and create content. And on the other hand, you're like, wow, these were like moths flying into a flame.
Yeah.
And hopefully, you know, there's some way. My sense is, if I had to, you know, at the risk of pissing off a lot of Yang Gang, I feel like we need a little bit more patience. That, you know, these things sometimes, like if you look at American history, like great kind of movements take time.
Yeah.
And, you know, the guy was on Rogan in what, March of 19? Like, it's like 18 months ago.
Yeah.
So, you know, like I know there's an urgency of we have a lot of problems, but just because we didn't kind of get to the finish line on the first go doesn't mean, you know, we hang it up. And hopefully you'll be making documentaries about exciting Yang stories in the future as well.
Yeah, the new Yang mayoral race documentary.
The mayoral race documentary, the presidential, the first term, the second term.
Yeah, that's what I want to make, the first term one.
Yeah, you'll have plenty on your hands, Monica. Well, thank you again for coming on the show, but more importantly, for putting in the time to do that documentary. I think with you and Ching Jewel, like for those of you guys who've not edited video, let me just tell you, these productions probably consumed a lot of your life for a long time.
Yeah.
It's probably like a master's thesis kind of thing, right? And so you didn't have to do that. You're not getting paid for it. You're not getting, you know, a ton of fame. Like, of course, people know about you, but that was a work of kind of devotion. And you probably were tempted to quit or stop it many times. And actually, you
never.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. I would have been.
This was so, Tom, I like can't even explain it. Felt like being possessed or something. Like
I love it.
It was just like I had to make it.
Well, you did an amazing job. It was super impressive. I watched the whole thing nonstop. Amazing. The kids loved it.
Yeah.
They're now very angry at MSNBC, but I'll try and you know, manage their expectations before they burn down. They're like, maybe we should go protest. I was like, protest now? Like, dude, you gotta keep your powder dry. We got more work to do. But hopefully we'll have you come back again, Monica. Thank you again for sharing and doing such amazing work. And if you guys haven't seen, everybody watching this hasn't seen the documentary, what is it? Is it called The Cavalry, or what's the official name?
The Cavalry, a Yang Gang documentary.
The Cavalry, a Yang Gang documentary. I put a link in the description below. Go watch it. It's really well done, and you'll enjoy it. I promise you. And you'll learn a little bit about probably a part of the Yang Gang that you yourself may not have seen. So, because there's so many kind of elements to it, like you do the high level, and then you have the personal stories, and then the Freedom Dividend recipients and the media coverage. Like there's something for everybody in that. So thanks again for doing it, and Happy New Year, Monica.
Oh, thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
With that, we're gonna say goodbye, nerds.